We have featured the organisation Hope Not Hate previously on Windows on the World. See our show Hope Not Hate and Israel's Lobbyists. We have also featured the subversive tactics used by this organisation against people who are acting responsibly and within the law. The Hope Not Hate website states, "We are passionate believers in liberty and free speech." It has been revealed recently that this group are acting as what could legally be described as a terrorist organisation. Here is the commonly used dictionary definition of terrorism: the systematic use of violence and intimidation to achieve some goal, and the use of violence and threats to intimidate or coerce, especially for political purposes. There have been allegations of publishing photographs and addresses of people they have targeted, setting up fake Twitter accounts to discredit people, and threats and actual violence by those associated with this organisation. So Hope Not Hate targets whoever they personally feel fits their interpretation of hate. The organisations, political parties and the people they target are bound by the laws of the land they operate in. So why can this group act as vigilantes and incite hatred against citizens of the UK who are acting within the law? On the Hope Not Hate website it states, "Hope Not Hate seeks to challenge and defeat the politics of hate and extremism within local communities, building resilience against the politics of hate and fear at a national and grassroots level. In order to maximise our contribution to the debate and comply with all UK legislation, Hope Not Hate operates via two separate and distinct legal entities, through which we deliver a range of activities and services. So let's look at its obligations as a charitable trust. To be a charity, your charity must have only charitable purposes, which must be for the public benefit. This is known as the public benefit requirement. The trustee's annual report must explain how the trust has carried out its purpose for the public benefit." On the Hope Not Hate website it states, "We are passionate believers in liberty and free speech." On Tuesday, May the 2nd, 2017, Hope Not Hate posted information that a talk by Nick Colostrum was being held at Diorama Arts Centre. The article stated that Colostrum was a Holocaust denier. The author Joe Mulhall is on the board of the Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. However, the talk had nothing to do with any Holocaust anywhere whatsoever. The group has never discussed any Holocaust. The post stated, "Leading Holocaust denier speaking in central London tonight. The Keep Talking group run by Ian Phantom for conspiracy theorists of all types, from Holocaust deniers, climate change deniers and 9/11 truthers. Its past guests include Piers Corbyn, brother of Jeremy, who claimed man-made climate change is a lie." Well, yes, it is, and it's been proven. So, everything on the site is like an exercise in basic psychological subversion. The question is, do these propagandists actually believe all this, or are they themselves victims of the type of propaganda they now peddle on behalf of global financial interests? Or is all this coming through them as third-party agents of the intelligence services, as their tactics mirror those of military intelligence and include the 4 Ds: deny, disrupt, degrade and deceive? We're going to talk to Aaron Little, who was actually at a meeting that was shut down by Hope Not Hate and Antifa at the Diorama Arts Centre in London. So Aaron, we've heard a little bit about what happened from Kevin Boyle and Nick Colostrum, who was really the victim of this group in a way, and they obviously totally misrepresented, or what was misrepresented was why they were there. They were there for a completely different reason. So this was actually a talk about the Westminster Bridge terror attack, and they descended on the diorama thinking that they were going to find a load of what they would think of as Nazis or fascists, and it was really just a debating society really, which is a group which meets once a month in central London called the Keep Talking group. So you arrived at the Diorama Arts Centre on the night. What were your first thoughts when you arrived?
Well, I was very surprised because it would have been my first time going there for a meeting with Keep Talking, because we've had a change of venue. So I turned the corner and suddenly there's a lot of people and flag waving, and I actually thought, oh, maybe I've gone to the wrong entrance. And then I realised that all of us, and I saw other members of the Keep Talking group, were being prevented from access. And I was like, well, why are they protesting us? Because we're just going to talk about, various things that have been happening in the news and dissecting it. And yet, words were screamed at us all, Nazi, fascist, scum and things. And I hadn't actually come across Antifa. I'd never heard of them. And then I thought, isn't that sort of anti-fascist? I sort of had a vague idea. And I heard some of the members of that group, some of the ones that were sort of unmasked. One particular guy, he was shouting out, I'm red through and through, I'm red through and through. I was thinking,
so the RMT union were there with these big flags.
Yeah.
It must have been quite confusing, really, I suppose, because the meeting was about the Westminster Bridge terror attacks we've just stated in the opener, and you've arrived there, and mainly you're one of the youngest people in the group, really, aren't you?
Yes, I am. It's just evolved that way. I mean, there tends to be a sort of select of people who are like 40s onwards to like 70s or 80s. I mean, it's quite a wide range of age, and it seems to be that I've been going to the group for 2 years because I like to go to lectures and I find it very educational, and I tend to always be sort of the youngest there, and also in the minority there, coincidentally. And I suppose it's just because other people get their information through different ways. Some people don't like to spend a Tuesday evening listening in a hall, often cold and dreary sort of hall or something. But of course this was a nicer venue, going to the Diorama.
So yeah, and actually I think it was the second meeting there. So it was shut down by this mob who'd presumably arrived just before you got there. And they were kind of in full flow when you arrived.
Exactly. I mean, there were other people also having various rooms in that particular building. So I could have sort of tried to get in by saying, well, I'm actually in with another group. But I thought, well, no, I'll just stand my ground. But to have our access denied and being told, why don't you... I mean, had it shouted at me, why don't you go back home? I was thinking, wow, that phrase just... You don't hear that. That's a
and
phrase.
it was the anti-fascists who said
that. Yeah, I was thinking, wow, that's a blast from the past when it comes to phrase. And of course, it was done by tall, youngish people, people of colour, I think, in terms of various hues and shades. But they were very much disguised and looking as if they were going to rob a bank. From a Western.
Yeah, we've put the pictures up, actually. Yeah, they covered not only their faces, but their eyes too, in some cases, wearing
and hoodies
goggles.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are sort of a mob that come in, and they loosely call themselves Antifa, anti-fascists, and it's a big thing in America. It's been funded by Soros, as indeed has Hope Not Hate over here, which is a charitable trust. We've already gone into that. So this organisation, Hope Not Hate, is inciting hatred against individuals and groups now. Particularly, they were attacking UKIP and Nigel Farage, and they've actually launched a court case against him, which doesn't seem to have much merit, but they're asking the public to fund that. But ironically, what they're doing is they are using very, very subversive techniques to incite people, really. What they're doing is they're inciting hatred. So the actual thing about it is very Orwellian, hope not hate. They seem to have this very intolerant attitude, but they say on their websites as we are passionate believers in liberty and free speech. So what would you actually say to that?
Well, I actually thought that they themselves were a fascist, racist party, because a lot of them had sort of skinheads. Although there were people of colour, people can still join a group, I suppose, if they don't like something. And I couldn't actually tell who they were, because there was the words they were shouting, the anger that emanated from them, their overall persona, and even wearing Dr. Martens and things. I thought that they were, I thought, wow, what's gone on here then? I was absolutely agog as to what kind of group they were. And the fact that they were calling me, I mean, I was called a Nazi and a fascist. I was looking behind myself thinking, who are they referring to? It was just so ludicrous,
Yeah, well, I find it quite ironic, the whole thing, because they also said something to you which was basically racially profiled you in their politically correct world. It must have been such a shocking moment for them, really, I suppose.
I mean, that's why I couldn't see any difference, because, to be honest, they were calling me names, whichever way. I sort of, at the Keep Talking group, I'm the person who sort of puts books and things on a sort of stand and magazines and whatever, in terms of for people's research materials. They can either buy or take away something and pay later, sort of thing. So I'm sort of like the person who holds the store keys, so to speak. So I had a bag of produce with me, videos, things like that. So for me to actually be called a thief just by being the person who runs the stall, I thought, I mean, it was by a particular person, which I don't know whether I should identify him, because I've since realised who he was. To be called a thief because I have some items with me, of produce with me, and then I actually walked up to him and said, you know, why on earth are you saying that? What makes you jump to that conclusion about me? Would it happen to be racially profiling? I mean, and of course the person was silent, and they were sort of shamed into a silence, and he went incredibly red at that point. And then I said, well, that's a very fascist thing to do, isn't it? To box me up and call me names and actually behave in a racist way, implying that black people are thieves, robbers, killers, whatever. You name all the stereotyping. I actually, you know, nailed him with that. And some of the other people who were part of this ANFA, who were also of colour but hidden with a mask, they went very quiet because they could recognise that this man's made a slip. I mean, you know, I mean, I've looked at this gentleman since, and I realise that, you know, he does try to do various good things for all people, but I suppose I could see it as a faux pas. But I did shout him out on it, and I think that he realised maybe he shouldn't have said that. So, you know, it's
it was quite an amusing anecdote as told by Kevin, but it's great to have you actually relaying it properly, because the thing is with this organisation is at the heart of it is intolerance. That's what it really points to, isn't it?
I mean, they basically said you can. I mean, because they were asked by people like Kevin and some other members. They were asked directly, you know, well, you know, do you believe in free speech? And they said, yes, we do believe in free speech, as long as you say what we want you to say and don't go against the party or don't say anything that's remotely questioning all sorts of other political issues. So it was a case of, well, in that case, it's not free unless I say what you want me to say. So
well, that's really interesting that they'd frame it like that. So you're paraphrasing, are you?
Well, no, I'm not actually paraphrasing, because they just kept saying that everything is against the state of Israel all the time and everything is against Zion, and they were just using, and I was thinking, what?
That's really interesting, because we look at the funding of these groups, and especially the Soros-backed ones as well. We've done a lot of work on Hope Not Hate, which has Ruth Smith as a director, who's obviously very big with BICOM. She's taken money off Paolo Zabludovic, the Israeli arms dealer, the billionaire who owns 40% of downtown Las Vegas and also funded David Cameron. So she has an agenda which you could say is for a foreign nation. And so these people are openly saying that, oh, it's all against Israel, when clearly this was about the Westminster Bridge attack. That was what was advertised or in the newsletter. So that's very interesting. That's almost a big faux pas in itself. I didn't realise that.
Yeah, I mean, so there was sort of very much saying, well, if you listen, or they even said, if you even know a person who's written something that we consider to be fascist or against the state of Israel or whatever, or anti-Semitic, even if you stand near someone, then you're part of him. So it's like, hold on a minute. So you're saying this man whose book you haven't read, whose information you haven't researched, you're saying that for us to even know him makes us some kind of a brute and a callous individual to humanity. And I just couldn't believe it, because a lot of these people appeared to have gone through the university education system, and yet they're saying, don't look here, don't look here. And it's quite alarming, because you couldn't really have a concise conversation, because the next minute they'll just call you scum and Nazi, and it's like, can you hear yourself? Because you're behaving exactly, but the point is that there's spittle coming out the mouths of some people with their anger. You can see it in their eyes. So it's like, I was quite bewildered, because it was like a Twilight Zone scenario. It really was, for me.
Well, that's interesting. You put a different perspective on it than I had. I already linked it to these Israeli lobbying groups and people, in particular Ruth Smith, as we said. And that's a really important point, I think, because we've now got Hope Not Hate, working with Antifa, and all these groups they're kind of they're all integrated. What they seem to be doing is finding fracture points, and they are attacking anybody who's against the globalist picture, which is really about the state of Israel. So that's really good you've brought that up. Now, the RMT were there, and that must have been incredibly confusing as well. Just tell us about what you thought about that.
Well, they were sort of surrounding the RMT leader, and they were very much at either side of him, and they were waving the flags and shouting out, "I'm red through and through." And because I had seen the trade union flag being waved, I just couldn't get it at first. It was only later I thought, oh, he meant his communism, his dedication to communism. But it all seemed like I felt as though that these people were having a performance, because even though they tried to look very fighty and aggressive, and they were with their mouth, but deep down you just knew their hearts weren't in it. I personally had the feeling, because one of the Antifa people tried to go through the produce I had and attempted to actually still go through my items, and I sort of put my hand to block her. At that point, she started screaming, "I've assaulted her," and she was like a elderly woman with a bad dye job sort of thing, and she was screaming, "Assault, assault, he's hit me," and I could clearly put my hand to stop her from, rummaging through my belongings. And the person who was opposite me, who was masked, they could see that, no, I didn't hit her or assault her in any way. He even said to her, no, he was just blocking you. And then he sort of said, but don't do it again. But I felt that, you know what, if I had, for example, roughly pushed that woman or anything, I don't think they would have really done anything. I think they just wanted to look menacing and fierce. Now, by saying this, I'm not wanting to encourage them to actually be violent, because I'm actually against violence myself. But I just felt that they were there at lastminute.com, and it was like they weren't expecting to see a load of regular looking people just coming in and listening. I think they expected to see, people in leather goose stepping around or something. I really think that we didn't live up to their expectations. They seemed quite disappointed because a lot of them left quite early.
Yeah,
I thought.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you've got these organisations like the EDL and Britain First, and there's something that's linking all these organisations together. Again, they're trying to find, they're looking for division and exploiting it. And I think this is an interesting thing, because when you brought up that about Israel, that does tie it all together for me now, because we've got, it was Joe Mulhall, he was a trustee of the Holocaust Memorial Day, and we've got all these Israeli links, as we said earlier, and I think that does tie it together quite a bit. So basically, it all seems to be okay as long as you don't criticise Israel. That's really what it's about, I think. That seems to be, from what you've said and from what my understanding of this really is, it's quite sophisticated unless you really understand how this counterintelligence stuff works, and then it becomes very simplistic, and we've tried to explain that in the opening to the show.
Well, it seems to me that anything regarding the state of Israel is just not open for examination, let alone question. Yeah. And what's sad about it is that even people who are claim to be Jewish or Zionists, they can't even bring it up. It seems to me that they're persecuted themselves.
The redefining of Zionism, which came about through Momentum, through John Landsman and his companies, Left Futures.
Oh, right.
Now, it's very interesting because the Left Futures blog was stating that we need to be told how we can discuss Zionism. So it's now up to other people to tell us how we can discuss our own
Which
views.
is what I find I find that very alarming, because there's always, like, for example, there's always people trying to tell you what history should be. There's always plenty of professors telling me, well, this is what happened regarding colonialism or the slave trade, all of this and that. And they don't get vilified for saying, well, actually, you're quite wrong when this happened. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. I've got a family inheritance story which doesn't quite say what you say. But no one vilifies them. I mean, I don't go around saying, how dare you comment on that because you don't have any ancestors who lived through it, or you're not familiar with what it was like to live on that particular island, or how this, that and the other. I mean, it just doesn't happen. But anyone mentions anything, or questions. For example, I came to a sort of questioning aspect, which was I was looking at numbers said by religious groups. Because there's plenty of religious groups who, during the Second World War, they themselves were targeted and imprisoned, particularly if they didn't conform and take up arms. And it's quite interesting to note that those particular religious organisations in Germany and throughout Bavaria, they themselves had some of their members imprisoned and put into concentration camps. And then afterwards, when you look at the publications or whatever afterwards, you look at their levels of people that they say were killed. Now, if you look at that level when it was first publications came out, they're very small. And yet, if you look at the levels today, they say they lost something like 10,000 members. And that's quite a jump, particularly when you're told some kind of thing over and over, and then you find out, well, why are they sort of expanding the numbers? So that does lead to question, well, who else is expanding their numbers? But of course, if I say certain things, I'm instantly targeted for it. And it's like, you have to live in, it seems like there's a fear paradigm going on, that, you know what, you question that, oh, you're in danger, you're in this, and it's like, well, what kind of world are we living in if you can't actually question, or if professors and people who work within certain areas, if they ask questions, they end up losing their job and their career.
Well, exactly. This is the historical narrative of something we're not allowed to question.
It's very effective. It does work, because, I mean, there's quite a list now. There's almost, I'd like to see if someone's compiled a professorship of leading independent researchers who've been vilified and called anti-Semitic and called all sorts of other names. Whereas if you look back at various other historians or people who do research, the stuff that they say, you'll think, oh yeah, that wasn't appropriate. But then it was the times. But you can't say anything now. You can't question. It's like we've all been politically correct, put into the same sausage moulding thing where we can't deviate or question. That's really dangerous.
Well, yeah, it's called controlling the narrative, and that's a big part of what these organisations are about, and it's very, very transparent when you get to look at it. But thanks a lot for coming in today, Aaron, and sharing your experiences. And that's it from this part of the show. We're going to be talking to peace activist James Thring in part 2. Welcome to Windows on the World. I'm Mark Windows. Now, over the years, we've put out a lot of information. The Windows on the World show has run for several years now. We've exposed corruption, found solutions, and put out some very useful information on many subjects since we started doing this. This includes, of course, the bigger picture, along with well-researched history, science, and of course, health matters, which we also cover. Now, our initial website was landofthefree.co.uk, and this was set up to fight the corporate courts, rogue bailiffs, and the unlawful actions of public officials. I and many others have successfully fought criminal bailiff companies and won in court against dishonest councils. This information is all still available. The journalistic integrity of Windows on the World is very important, and we tried to put out information that's forensically accurate and simplistic as possible. So we try and put everything out in a very easy way for people to understand, because over the years there's been a lot of misinformation and disinformation, especially with where people stand within the law, and it's got a lot of people into trouble. So we've always stayed on the right side of the law, but being able to empower people to go into court and do the right thing, that's very important to us. Now, I put this information out to the public because I feel it needs to be there. And even within so-called alternative media, there is much information which is misleading and incorrect. In fact, all the things the now ridiculous mainstream media accuses the alternative media of, there are people putting out stuff that's very, very unhelpful, and we try not to do that. So we accept no funding from anybody and are completely independent. And it's now increasingly necessary that we get some help to fund what we're doing. We're looking for sponsors from self-employed small business sector, which, as we know, is being destroyed, and we cover this a lot on the show with the plans for regeneration, the soaring business rates, and the destruction of what we used to know as our environment, because we're finding that people now are being pushed out and socially engineered from the places that they need to be. We'd also like to appeal to individuals who might be able to donate. Now, the donate button on the site, you can just scroll down to the bottom of the page, and it's also on every article and every video on the site, on windowsontheworld.net. Now, I've never asked for any donations before, but things are getting a bit tighter for us and we want to carry on and expand what we're doing. That's the most important thing, to expand what we're doing and be able to bring you much more information, which is very difficult at the moment because there's just a few of us. So, the bottom line is, if you can spare a few quid and enjoy what we're doing, press the donate button, we'll be very grateful. And if there's anybody out there, small businesses, who benefit from the sort of information that we put out, and we know there's quite a few because we've been contacted by them, if you'd like to make a small contribution or help out in any way, we'd be most grateful. That's the end of that, and we'll see you soon on Windows on the World.